Hello, I'm Kads and welcome to today's video. It is that time again. As promised here, we do have another specific challenge tournament going on. This time it is Dragon featuring only the Bannerlords faction. Now, since it is live, we can already check out the rewards, and unfortunately there is no Void Shard up for grabs, but there is some 20 Soul Essence, Immortal Soul Essence up for grabs, which to me I find really useful, but to majority of people you might not find that useful. So as you can see, I've done a decent chunk of the work already. Like I said in my video yesterday, this is going to be my primary focus, particularly with the clan shop energy as well as my daily energy for the day. So I'm definitely going to go a little bit harder, probably going to pass 1800, but I think Mr. White UA here was way far gone with first place. So I think I'm just going to fight and try to keep second place and try to get some of that 6-star Relentless gear here. So as usual, let's hop over to the dungeon itself and let's talk about the stages I recommend for you to do. Like usual, I would say stage 20 is always the best points, the best bang for your buck, so it's the best points for energy spent. So for stuff like this where you really need to do it in a relatively short amount of time, 4 to 8 hours, then it's better to drop down to stage 20 or something like that, just because it's really relatively cheaper. You still get 5 to 6-star gear and you just get a little more bang for your buck. Stage 16 is also available for those who are more in the early or the mid game, if you can get that far, because Dragon is the easiest dungeon of all, and if you just happen to have some Bannerlords champions lying around, they might be able to work for that. Or if you want to push it a bit harder like I did in this case, you can go all the way up to stage 25, where in this case the debuffer we're going to talk about, Stag Knight, is positive affinity. He's negative affinity for stage 20, so that's part of the reason why I didn't want to do stage 20. But if you can figure out a team for stage 25 like I did, then that works well too. Quick note about hard mode. I did see if my team could handle hard mode, and I was definitely able to do stage 2, which is Void, but I could not succeed on stage 6 consistently, and so it wasn't really worth it, and my team's not really optimized for Dragon in general. I do have Stultus Dragonbane, who is very S tier for this fight, but he's not built in a regen set or anything like that to be able to kind of finish the boss or solo the boss. So if I had rebuilt him, which I don't like to do for things like this, especially short term, then maybe I could have pushed a bit harder into hard mode and showcased that. So as I mentioned, I've been running stage 25 here, and this is the team that I have. We have Stultus Dragonbane in the lead, who's doing the job of a nuker. We have our debuffer Stag Knight here. We have a buffer, an Archmage helmet, a Doom Tower champion. So he goes as increased crit damage, increased speed, increased crit rate, and a secondary chance to stun, along with Stultus, who's also CC. We have a relatively unknown epic here of Sir Archmage, who's a decent hard-hitting nuker, AoE nuker, as well as a little bit of single target, and of course our reviver / support, Ursula the Mourner. And I do like to give credit where credit is due, because shout out to Mad Capper, who did a video showcase on Sir Archmage on his channel, the series about building champions so you don't have to, that showed that he hits relatively hard, and I happen to be in the market for another DPS alongside Stultus to do some damage in the Bannerlords faction crypt, and so he was the choice I ended up settling with. It was between him and Lady Quillen, and I think Sir Archmage just outdamaged her a little bit more. So either one would have worked, but I chose him over her. So this runs a little bit slower and it's relatively self-explanatory, so I'm not going to run it for you guys this time, but I do have a screenshot from one of my successful runs, and they've never failed. It's stage 25, it's not too difficult. Ursula's built with resistance. We'll talk about the builds later. So she doesn't get poisoned at all, and she's in a regen set. So not worried about the team wiping or anything like that. But as you can see here, the team takes about usually between 3 and 4 minutes. I haven't seen anything that's below 3. It's just a slower team, particularly on the dragon phase, because as you can see, we don't have a poisoner in here. And so we have to kill the dragon with raw damage, which just takes a long time because he does have a lot of health. As you'd expect, Stultus is the main DPS carry, but you also have a decent amount of damage from Sir Archmage, who again is the backup DPS for this composition. So now I'm going to show you guys the builds on these champions that I use for this composition. And it's not meant for you to necessarily copy the builds from these champions if you happen to have them, more just to show a full transparency of how the team works. So starting here at the top with Stultus Dragonbane, who's in my arena build here in Perception and Savage, and I do want to flex a little bit on this sweet 6-star ring with the triple defense roll with some HP. One of my favorite pieces for him. But his total stats here are 43k, just under 44,000 on the HP, almost 5.7 on the defense, 197 speed, full crit rate, and 255 crit damage with a little bit of 330 accuracy. Next to him, we have my Ursula the Mourner, who I mentioned was in a regen set, a little bit of perception as well, and she's just in a Faction Wars build, nothing particularly special here. But on her, we have a total of about 51,000 HP, 2600 on the defense, 224 on the speed, 384 on the resistance, and 259 on the accuracy. I have her built this way so that she can resist most of the normal mode dungeons, as well as the Faction Wars boss and anything else that might put debuffs on her, but I also gave her enough accuracy so that I can use the decrease attack as well. Next up, we have Mr. Unknown here, Sir Archmage, who I have in a smattering of gear, some cruel, some offense set. Nothing special. Again, he's just built for Faction Wars. If we look at his total stats, 30k on the HP, just about 4.8k on the attack, 210 on the speed, so pretty quick, full crit rate, and 218 on the crit damage, and basically no resistance or accuracy. For those of you wondering what on earth this guy even does, let's look at his skills real quickly. As a double hitter on the A1, first hit can place decreased defense, second hit can place decreased speed, 50% chance when booked. He has this AoE here, where he can remove all debuffs from himself, which works surprisingly well, especially against the poisons for the dragon. He can just strip them off himself. 3-turn cooldown and AoE attack. 4.2 multiplier on that one. The A1 has a 2.1 for each of the hits. And the A3 here is a big single target smack that ignores 30% of your defense. And with the addition of the cruel set, in this case, it will ignore 35%. And this has a multiplier of 6.7. So a pretty hefty hit there that can definitely one-shot some enemies. And if you do happen to kill someone, he gets an irremovable increased attack and increased crit damage buff for 2 turns on himself. Before I get too far here, I forgot to mention the masteries. In this case, Sir Archmage, again, Faction Wars champion. I gave him the crit rate. No masteries, doesn't really matter. He does enough damage. Stultus is the main carry. Ursula, same thing. She has a tiny bit tier 1s, but nothing really fancy. Then Stultus is fully mastered because I do use him in arena, and we go all the way down to Helm Smasher as our tier 6 mastery. Up next for the builds, we do have Archmage's helmet here and a smattering of gear, a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of offense. He does have decent multipliers. He hits relatively hard, but his base attack is so low that it kind of cancels out. So he hits okay. And you can see here, Faction Wars champion, again, not really maxed out on the gear, so I didn't try too hard in his build. But nonetheless, 46k on the HP, 2.3k on the attack, 234 on the speed, full crit rate, 177 on the crit damage, and just enough for Faction Wars 280 accuracy. As you might have guessed, he also has just the tier 1 masteries. That's the trend for all of the Faction Wars specific champions. I don't feel the need to fully master them. Maybe one day if I have nothing else to do, but for what I need, he does his job. And lastly, we have Stag Knight, one of the OG debuffers in the game, one of the original 3. It was him, War Maiden, and Tyrell for the longest time in the early games of Raid. A little history 101 there, to use Chosen's line. But he was one of the original 3 debuffers in the game. Now they're a dime a dozen, but he's been in the game for a very, very long time. And it was very sought after by a lot of the community early on. But I have him in an Immortal and a Shield set. He is fairly tanky, high HP, and so the Shield set works really well on him. And this is mainly for the first hits of the Stage 21 Faction Wars boss, where it ignores a bunch of defense. So having that shield up there just mitigates a bunch of damage, so we don't have people dying. So if we look at his total stats here, we're looking at 63,000 on the HP, 2,600 on the defense, 252 on the speed, so relatively quick, and then 407 on the accuracy. And now for the beefy part of the video that everyone totally enjoys, we're going to talk about the potential substitutions. I will try to make this quick because it is only one faction, so let's dive right in. So starting off with the nukers, honorable mention to Killian or Cillian the Lucky, however you say it. He does have the block active skills AoE for 2 turns, which is pretty neat. So he's good for the CC. For those who've been playing in the past year or so, we'll have Rhonda, the free daily login reward champion. And again, if she's built on your account, used for arena or some other purpose, you can just stick her in your team, particularly on stage 20 where she's positive affinity, and she's just going to lay down the smacks like she normally does. Obviously, I did use Stultus on my team. Another mention would be Septimus here, the king of the enemy max HP hits. Unfortunately, he's negative affinity for stage 20, and he's weaker or neutered for the stage 21 to 25 because the enemy max HP hits are capped. But nonetheless, definitely a fun champion, and he definitely has the hardest hitting enemy max HP hit in the game, albeit single target. If you're fortunate enough to have some of these Void Legendaries, then of course Baron, king of the nukes here with the AoE here on Skypiercer that ignores half your defense and ignores block damage. So he can basically one-shot the waves if you have him built super well. And similarly, if you have Terras, you can probably one-shot the waves as well if you get a bunch of buffs on them. So if you have one of those champions, obviously you're going to use them because they will absolutely destroy the waves and probably the boss too. So this is the dragon. So let's talk about some poisoners that you could use. We don't have to go very far. We do have Richtof the Bold here, who on the A2 Bloodletting does attack one enemy 3 times, but each of those hits places poisons on all enemies. So you can stack poisons pretty well on a 3-turn cooldown on AoEs. And he used to be one of the solo champions that people used to get through. So if you do have him built for that purpose, from way back when. He can still do the job as long as you put him with food from the Bannerlord's faction. Other than that, someone I considered building for the purpose of this dungeon, but I ultimately decided to just be lazy and not do it, is Rowan, who does have some poisons here, a four-time hitter on the A3 that places poisons on each of the hits, so she can definitely stack some poisons on the dragon. But I ended up not building her, but one of these days I might get around to just building her for fun for stuff like this. For your debuffers, there's no one in the legendary category. However, of course, we used Stagnite here, known for the decreased defense and decreased attack. But if you're unlucky and you do not have that amazingly awesome epic, then there's actually a Void rare here that is Dagger, who has a kind of like a War Maiden type ability, but a little less likely. But she is Void Affinity, which is a benefit over War Maiden, but 75% chance to place the big version of decreased defense on a 3-turn cooldown. So pretty decent. If you happen to have her, put her at 50 or 40, depending on if you can keep her alive. She is relatively squishy, and she can just kind of do the job for your AoE decreased defense. Also, I do want to honorably mention Oathbound here, who doesn't have decreased defense, but he does have AoE decreased attack. So if you're taking too much damage from the waves, particularly the Hordens and the Tyrells on stage 20, then AoE decreased attack can be useful to kind of reduce the damage you take. For the supports in the faction, start with Sathali here, who does have the AoE buff strip here that has a deceptive amount of turn meter fill if you remove enough of them. But of course, she's also well known for this 2-turn cooldown where she can fully heal an ally, basically 75%, and then put block debuffs on them. So you can basically cleanse anyone who's a little bit lower or weaker when the dragon does his poison ability. We also have Sigmund, who does have AoE provoke and decrease attack. So again, he can protect your team, kind of like the Oathbound, and he can also place decreased attack so that you take less damage, and he takes less damage as well. I think he also does have an AoE strengthen, so you all can take less damage. Manaya is more well known to be with her partner of Coronar and more oppressive in the arena and Hydra and stuff like that. But on her own, she is a decent, probably B- tier healer. Now, one champion who is quite cool for this fight would actually be Helior here, because on the A3, he has this ability here, which is effectively a full cleanse, where he'll transfer all debuffs from all allies and place them on the target enemy. He attacks them with his A1 here, and he converts his resistance into accuracy when he uses the skill. So you don't have to build him with any accuracy, you could just build him with resistance, and when he is using this ability, his A1 effectively becomes high accuracy depending on his resistance. So for the folks like me who happen to have him but also don't have a good poisoner for the dragon phase, this ability here could definitely take all the poisons from your team and throw it back on the dragon, kind of like Stultus's passive. But despite having 3 Hellier's account, one of which is built, I don't have him geared, and he's also unbooked, so having a 5-turn cooldown may not be worth it. I still might experiment with it just to see, but I probably will stick with the team that I have. Continuing on, honorable mention to Lugan the Steadfast, who does have a Vrask-like heal on the A1. He does also have ally protection and increased defense on himself, with of course the block active skill similar to Cillian the Lucky, that you can get some CC out of him. Back into the Void legendaries, obviously if you happen to have Raglan, she's very, very well known for this 2-turn cooldown revive with 75% HP and a full turn meter, and of course this 4-turn cooldown on a full cleanse that unfortunately scales with attack. I'm still hoping that maybe one day they'll turn this around and make this scale with her HP, which would be which would make a lot more sense for a support champion. But shit, they haven't done it yet, so maybe one day. And of course, we have the other half of the absolutely broken pair in the arena, which is Marichka here, who has a full cleanse here with a chance to get an extra turn depending on how many debuffs are removed, as well as the massive heal of 40% of her HP with a irremovable strengthen as well. There aren't that many good support epics in this category, but of course, Ursula the Mourner is the one that I featured for my team. Alrighty, so that's going to do it for today's video. Be sure to check your group, and hopefully it's an easy one just to see how they're doing. If they're pretty dead, there are a lot of other events going on. There is a 3x drop frenzy on Savage Gear, so definitely a lot more people are going to be running Fire Knight, so be sure to check your group and see if it's relatively inactive, kind of like mine is, and you just may be able to squeeze in there and get some pretty decent Relentless gear. As usual, feel free to comment down below the team that you're going to use if you're participating in this dungeon, because I always like to see what you guys come up with. And as always, if you found this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below, and if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit that subscribe button also down below. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.